Good day. It's Tony Fortunato from the technology firm. And today I've got Mr. Michael Taylor here with me. We're going to chat a little bit about Dynatrace. And okay, you know what? I didn't know if I was going to do this, but I'm going to do it. Look, see, I got a shirt. Skip the preamble. Isn't that great? Look at that. All right. So Mike is a systems engineer for Dynatrace. He's been there for about 10 years, give or take. I've known Mike since, I had to look this up, 2000.
Yes.
Can you believe that?
Yeah, back in the early CBC days, right?
Oh my
It's going
God,
back a few years.
we're so old.
I know.
All right. So
But
Mike,
still good looking.
yeah, right. At least one of us is. So we're going to talk a little bit about APM. We're going to talk about Dynatrace, and Mike's going to do a little slideshow for us and explain what he does. So I'm going to kick it off to Mike, and he's going to share a screen, and we're going to kind of dive right into it.
Yeah, so go ahead.
I was going to say, before you start that, Mike, two quick questions. We kind
Yeah.
of talked about this earlier. I figured it's a good time to just do it now and get over with. So
Yeah.
first question is, what the heck's an APM? And
Mhm.
the second one is, who the heck is Dynatrace?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So APM is application performance monitoring, right? And so it's been around for a while. And basically what APM is about monitoring transactions, their performance, the availability, that kind of stuff, and making sure that if things are slow, it's about, understanding where they're slow and why they're slow. And they do obviously a big service for a lot of companies because they're trying to reduce everything they can to reduce transaction timings and make sure the availability is there. And if things are slow, be able to find out why they're slow or why there's exceptions or why there's JavaScript errors and be able to fix it.
Cool. Are you getting more attention now during the COVID crisis because more people are accessing remote stuff?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So any kind of e-commerce, be it banking, telco, insurance, healthcare, right? All those companies are really looking to solutions like ours to go out there and help them out as they're getting, for lack of better words, crushed with the volume and the traffic that's coming into their web properties.
Yeah, I can see that. All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So let's crank her up.
All right. So let me share a little bit here for everybody. I'll just share my desktop real quick.
There we go.
So yeah, does it look okay? All
Yep.
good?
Yep.
All right. So just a little bit of an overview of what Dynatrace is as we're going through this so everyone understands. So certainly what it is, it's an agent-based technology. It goes into your systems, your servers, and it also does JavaScript injection. So it collects this data set and it pieces it together into an entity relationship model that we call the Smartscape. And that data is then sent off to a deterministic AI engine called Davis. And Davis then goes in and actually tells people what the root cause of their problems are so that ultimately from an operational team, a development team, a business team that needs to keep an eye on this stuff as obviously COVID-19 is going on and outside of COVID-19, it's about being able to quickly diagnose and provide answers and not data. Right, so teams don't spend time trying to dig into charts, dig into graph, do correlation, that kind of stuff to find out why things are slow. And so it's made up of a few different pieces and parts. Ultimately, we've got synthetics that we do. We've got real user monitoring. We've got session replay. We've got the agent-based technology in the background, log analytics, right, and all this stuff where we can ingest data into Davis. And so that's been one of the big reasons why Dynatrace has done well, and it's been around for a while. But certainly in the last 4 or 5 years, with the new Dynatrace platform that's out there, it's really started to take off because of its ability to find and fix and identify problems really, really quickly. Right, so that's kind of Dynatrace.
Cool.
So we thought this was an interesting story to share, and obviously it was a Canadian news site, and this is not just one. It's our synthetics. So our synthetics are out there tracking down, how the health of some of these news sites are. Could be banking, e-commerce, retail, you name it, right? We've got the ability to monitor all these sites. And so what we thought was interesting is, certainly from a Canadian perspective, was this crush here that you see around February 24th when everyone was really starting to hit the news sites a lot more frequently to get information and find out what was going on. And so what we're looking at here is a key metric, but it's the page load time. But as I was talking to you, Tony, about this, it's it's up to companies to decide what their KPIs are, and some of them that we see that are more prominent are visually complete and the speed index. So what this just kind of showed is that ultimately there's some sites that were doing really well and others that weren't doing so well. And obviously we're not going to put anything out here that would call the baby ugly, if you will, Tony. So we're going to keep that all hidden from everyone to
Yeah, for
not see,
sure.
but I think the data is there for everyone to kind of articulate. So it was a really bad problem. So this is a good story, though. Like it's a happy ending, if you will, in that this site obviously recognized that there was big problems that were going on, and unfortunately unhappy end user experience. And it kind of brings it to that next level, right, Tony? With all the COVID-19 stuff and these being news sites,
Yeah.
it's important for people to get access to information as quickly as they can and deal with it and process it as best they can. So this site, as you can see, around March 24th, made some pretty substantial changes to their web property to improve the end user experience. And so some of these metrics that you see here on the bottom are the speed index and the visually complete and the DOM interactive. So all these core metrics that companies need to monitor. And in this case, we're doing it synthetically, but a lot of our customers or other customers out there are doing it with real user monitoring or even session replay. So there's a lot of ways of looking at this data.
That was my question to you. It doesn't have to
Yep.
be synthetic. It can be real screens with real data, with real,
Right.
measurements, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting too to see some of the use case. Like synthetics was like the ruler of the world for a long time, and then real user monitoring kind of really took off around 5, 6 years ago. But now we're seeing a bit of a surge back into synthetics, and it's not necessarily in all the places that you'd think. Like with synthetics, the common use case is I want to test it out when it's off peak hours, when I don't have a real user coming in, because I
Hmm.
want to know before I get up in the morning, what's going down, right? I don't want my real users coming in and tell me that I got a problem. So that was a common use case for synthetics. Another common use case was that clean room, good quality, repeatable process that just keeps running in a nice static environment so you can get a good number, a good consistent number. And so when things are bad, you know about it. But now what we're starting to see is a lot more of the delivery pipelines where people are using synthetics for API testing. And not only are they using it for their API testing, but then they turn around and will fail builds if an API doesn't return back in a certain period of time. So they're
Hmm.
using it for functional testing, but they're also using it for performance testing. So it's interesting now and how that's become completely automated. So instead of necessarily having a person, or persons doing that kind of analytics, now what they're doing is relying more and more on automating that and making it so that the development teams that are, really trying to crank out the agile flows and get the new functionality into their web properties or mobile properties or whatever, are able to get that feedback loop really quickly so they can say, hey, failed to build, hey, we got to go fix it. It's a functional issue, it's a performance issue. And so we're seeing a bit of new use cases, if you will, in the synthetic side.
And as far as KPIs go, do you find people actually know or have done any kind of KPIs, or are they looking to you guys with your software to say, whatever you tell me is going to be my KPI moving forward as a baseline? Like, how's that
Yeah,
work?
it's an interesting question because it's in our previous generational software, which was called AppMon. That was one of its big Achilles heels, Tony, is that it always had to be a feedback loop where you go to the line of business owner, you go to the application owner and say, okay, what's your SLO? What's your SLI? What are your KPIs? And so you could get monitoring up and going, you could get things running really quickly, but then to get the thresholds to alert or trigger on something, that was always the tricky part, because now you had to ask somebody like, hey, Tony, what do you think? 200 milliseconds, 300 milliseconds, what's acceptable to you? I can't be the guy on the other side setting up the monitoring for you saying, hey, Tony, you should set this thing to 200. So what Dynatrace chose to do is build it in and baseline automatically and then alert automatically based on thresholds that we've seen as good indicators of poor performance. And so what that did now is all of a sudden it starts to trigger problem cards saying that, okay, service A response time is really, really slow. And because of that, then go in and show the root cause of why that service is slow. So now what it's done is just reduce that time that it took to get monitoring set and the alerts set. It's there already. But then to have the teams be able to get those notifications and it goes out to wide teams in very short periods of time, it just helps everyone solve problems a lot faster.
And as far as the actual reports go,
Yeah,
you don't need to be a packet guy or a server guy or a network guy or an application guy to look at the number and say, oh wow, it was 3 and now it's 50. That is bad.
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That kind of thing.
Yeah, that's been one of the, like, it's not to say that deep analytics aren't still needed, or I think what's changed is it's not necessary root cause analysis, Tony, it's root cause validation, if you will. So all of a sudden it gives you the clue, it tells you, hey, here's your problem, here's the root cause of that problem, and now you're building up a trust, if you will. Like, did it really do the right thing? Did it really do what I think it did? And so people are going in, and instead of taking 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours to find out why there's a problem, it takes you 15 minutes to validate it and say, yeah, that makes sense, right?
All right.
So there's a trust that comes
So
into it.
on this screen, you've boxed out a couple of things. Are these metrics that you usually look for, or just in this example kind of jumped out at you?
Yeah, I think what the tool does is it doesn't show it here at the top, but it would give you some of the high areas of concern, right? And so what I've done is expanded them out just so it was a bit more, you know, PowerPoint friendly.
Right.
And what it's doing here is showing you the areas that you need to focus on. So in the top left, you can see that there's 12 errors, but even in the middle there. So this, let me explain. So this was before, right? The
Mhm.
transaction here on the left-hand side, that was before. That was when it was 30 seconds. Then on the right side is the screen where it was 6 seconds. And so
Right.
what it's showing is things that people need to focus on. So like the one that's already highlighted at 4.27 megabytes transfer size, like that's a big page. That's a lot of content to
Hmm.
bring down to any individual users. But things like the third-party requests, which are ultimately things like calls to an ad service, calls to a tracking service, or like an analytics service, if you will, or whatever, right? Maybe you're bringing in content from a third party. It could be anything. But what happens when sites start to get crushed with volume is it's good practice to start to lean it up, and that's what this customer did. So then you can flip it over to the right side, and you see that from the third party calls, they literally cut it down by 2/3.
Right.
So 117, their main page weight almost in half. Well, obviously close to it, but 2.4 megabytes per second. But they did so much more, right? They reduced the number of first-party calls from 8 to 2. So a first-party call would be going back to your origin. Do you know what I mean? Going back to your main web and app servers. So dropping that down just reduces the crush
Right.
of you pushing out new content. It goes maybe into your CDNs so that you can obviously get it out there, but there's still calls that come back into origin. And so when you have many calls coming back to origin, like Tony, right, with TCP connections, they're finite, right?
Hmm.
So when the volumes come in and you're doing many connections back to origin, you're asking for a world of hurt.
Cool. Now the software itself, when it starts
Mhm.
telling you about the problems, what's an example of the level of detail it can actually tell you that there's something wrong?
Yeah, so it gives you the waterfall down below. So it literally will, and I cropped it off to protect the innocent
Yeah.
again, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's too much detail in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with that, it will tell you all the individual elements that make up a page, that make up an XHR, that make up a single page application, like all those stuff, the new stuff and the old stuff. And so what it's able to do then is then get you into details like JavaScript errors. Like if there's actually JavaScript errors that were happening on your page, it'll give you a stack trace.
Hmm.
Or what's even cool is that this is the front end. So we're looking at a browser, a mobile device, whatever. It could be a crash, like on the mobile side. It could be crashes that are happening in your mobile native app. Well, we provide you with the ability to actually go and do the crash dump and pull that crash dump back in, so the development teams can then go and fix the crash as quickly as possible, push a new version of code out. But I think some of the where customers or prospects really start to excel is when they connect the front end, Tony, where it's the mobile, it's the
Yeah.
browser based, with the agents on the back end,
Right.
where literally you can see, hey, Tony, was hitting a specific web property. All of a sudden he did this XHR call. That XHR call then turned around and did an API call into the back end. So what Dynatrace does is it links that front end to the back end to give you the forensics on the back end. So now you could get into methods and method arguments and code level and traceability that goes from, you know, 5, 10, 50, 100 hosts all the way through. So it's been a lot of fun. We've had a great ride over the last little while because of the scale and size that we can get to. So it's been a lot of fun, but hopefully that answers your question on depth.
Oh yeah. So you can get as generic as here's this cute little screen saying amount of transfer size, or you can dig right down into the actual calls and find
Yep.
out exactly what's causing, you know, quote unquote, the performance issue or the problem at hand, right?
Yep. 100%.
So as far as the software goes, it all looks great, but then I always ask people, so how do you deploy this thing? Like, do you need a box? Do you need software? Like, how does this work?
So we got two ways. So customers, that maybe are needing it to be on premise, they can install their software on premise, and it's a server software, and it gets installed on the agents get installed on the actual servers that you're looking to monitor. So it is agent based. It could be agentless as well. And what it does is like and that's part of what we've been successful at is it's completely automated. So it's like literally one script, one executable file that gets put onto a server, and then the whole process from there is that you run that script. All you do is restart your process, and it's up and running. It starts to baseline the services, detect the transactions, go down into the code level, and do the JavaScript injection in the front end so you can get that visibility into the browsers that you're seeing here. So it's become a platform, Dynatrace, with a single pane of glass, but certainly from a standpoint of a visa deployment, if somebody said, hey, I wanted to try it, they could also do SaaS. And then maybe they want to stay SaaS. They can definitely do that. So, as a little plug to the company, it's dynatrace.com/trial,
Mhm.
and it should be up and going in about 15 minutes. Once you click trial and put in the little bit of information that we do need, you're up and going in about 15 minutes, and you could literally be deploying agents. And some amazing stories of, I've got one where a banking customer of mine literally installed 800 hosts in 8 hours. Couldn't believe it. Like they had teams of people, right? They had 4 or 5 guys that were all set up and queued up, and they had Ansible scripts and all this stuff. But you know, it's just it's amazing to see, because you and I are a little bit younger, older. I don't know.
Speak for yourself.
But we've been around the block a few times to understand that this stuff used to be really hard, and it's
Yeah,
not anymore, right?
yeah. Very
So it's been
cool.
fun.
All right. So I guess we'll cut it at that, Mike. This was awesome.
Okay,
Thank you very much for the
cool.
intro. And what I'll do is Mike's URL that he just mentioned a second ago, I will put into the article and we'll post it, and you can go try out the trial. And if you have any questions, by all means, Dynatrace, you can get a hold of them, or you can always post your comments on Network Datapedia, and I will send them off. But the best thing to do, go to Dynatrace, and you can try it out, or you can actually ask your questions. Have a good day. Thanks for coming out, Mike.
Thank you, Tony, for having me. Appreciate it. Be well, everyone.
Bye for now.